You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Iboxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I didn't have to read that at all, by the way. It is that ingrained.
It's like we've done this once or twice.
A few times. I think we're up to episode 94.
Something.
4? Something like that today.
Coming up on a century mark, right?
We're rapidly approaching the triple digits. I'm your host, Matt Yette, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Cozzolino. Matt, how are you?
I'm great this morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good. Sometimes a Friday morning, I'm kind of like my shoulders are a little bit lower, and
You had some spunky energy as we're getting prepped for this.
I'm feeling good. As everybody's super busy, and then there's like the personal /work /personal /nerd stuff, home lab. I have some cool developments, and I've gotten over the hump on a couple things I'm going to tell you about later. You're going to like. We're getting Docker.
Yeah.
Containers.
Ooh.
Containers.
Yeah, he's getting some.
I'm not crapping on him. Having said that, we are going to be talking about some of our favorite things, and certification, and I might do the bleep afterwards.
You're going to do the bleep afterwards.
On the podcast.
So we just heard a bleep, and you said I just did a bleep there. I see.
But before we get into it, I want to make a couple of announcements of some events we have coming up. We have an ARIA workshop coming up on August 8th. So that's a Thursday. This pod should be dropping prior to that. So hopefully you're hearing this before that. But it's a free workshop. You can register. We'll have the link in the podcast description, so you can go ahead and register for it. But it is high level with Broadcom's realignment of the SKUs that they're selling for VMware, greatly simplified. One of the core suites is VVF, VMware vSphere Foundation, and that is, hey, I'm an Enterprise Plus customer. What is the new version of Enterprise Plus? And really, the answer is VVF. That comes with Enterprise Plus, but it also comes with ARIA operations. You might know this as VROPS, or it used to be VCOPS, right, way back in the original days. But it is vRealize operations, now known as ARIA operations. The concept behind it is we're going to have a good number of customers that are now entitled to ARIA and have no experience with it, no idea what is it, should I use it, and we are putting together a workshop. And we're also having a class on ARIA. So, hey, if you're entitled to it, let's take advantage of it. Let's help you, embrace it and take advantage. So the ARIA workshop, August 8th, and the class for that is September 24th. So there'll be a lot of literature posted about that. But, check the links. And we have, Kaz, tell us about what's coming up also in September.
Also
You're going
in
on
September.
a trip, aren't you?
I'm friggin' everywhere in September. I'm going to be down in Portland for a minute, and then I'm going to VMware Explore, and I'm going to write a book report for it.
Is this VMworld?
Yeah,
that's VMworld. Right?
This is VMworld. This is their annual vendor conference thing, right? Where we talk about all things
VMworld.
Yeah. So we went through. I came up with a bunch of the sessions I'm going to sit through. Took a look at everything. Signed up for the ones that we think are most appropriate and relevant for you, our customers. And basically that means like I know AI is big, AI is hot. When I hear vendors talk about it, it's mostly, hey, here's how you can do your AI stuff. And honestly, I see most customers we have are consuming applications that run that in the background. So they've already got it packaged. They've already got it put together. Here's this AI component that we've added to this application you're using. So because there's that difference, we kind of focus on the ones that we think are more appropriate for you, the end users that we actually work with most of the time.
I love that Wolf of Wall Street meme. Have you seen the movie, Matt?
I have.
Scorsese film, and at the very end, it's got Belfort going through that coaching session, right? And he
sell me a pen.
Pulls up sell me this pen, and the meme shows the guy says it has AI.
I haven't seen that one.
That's really, really good and accurate and appropriate too. So Yeah,
everything.
if you're
The buzz.
if you're familiar with Ivoxy, and hopefully you are, if you're listening to this, and if you're not, then this is pretty neat. We've done what we call VMworld Redux for boy, a long, long time. And the concept behind that was, hey, going down to Vegas or San Fran for a week for a conference is a big to do, and maybe your boss won't send you, or it's too expensive, or any number of reasons why it just doesn't work out. Come to our half-day event in person after it, where we kind of distill down what we think is important to know. And it's proven to be super, super popular. It's our most popular event that we have every year.
We have people asking about it every year, right?
Every year. And
I think it's that
and I will say, in the last few years, it's probably been the most ho-hum. Like there was a time that VMworld was the conference. You're talking the days of 4.1, 5.0, 5.5. Like the hypervisor, that ecosystem was really making, it was still not in its infancy, but was still in that growth phase of cool new features. And not to say there's no new features, but it's been more about what do we acquire this year? What companies did we buy?
It's that, or a lot of it's the things like, vMotion is faster or better. You can do things like that.
Right. You
iterations,
can now do
little iterations of things. Yeah.
8-way fault tolerance instead of 4-way, things like that. Mm-hmm. But now, I got to say, for better or worse, this is probably going to be the most interesting VMworld or VMware Explorer in some number of years. So hopefully we'll be able to bring you some really great content. I'm psyched that you're going, Coz. Thank you for spending the time, and
of course.
Don't lose all of our money at the tables. But
I worked in a casino. Actually, that was one of my very, very early jobs. I worked in a casino.
Were you a pit boss?
That's me. Yeah. Yep. No, I did IT there. I got to see the insides of slot machines and how they work. And I can tell you that I will never gamble.
Yep.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
It's not for me.
So yes, check out the descriptions on in your podcast player, or go to ivoxy.com and find our podcast blog and find the links to register for the ARIA workshop, and for VMware or Explore Redux. Stay tuned, because we'll have a link also for registering for one of those three: Portland, Olympia, Seattle, in that order, September 10th, 11th, 12th. Right. So I'm going to be flying out there, Kaz. I'll be with you.
I got
emceeing. We'll be doing. It's gonna be great. Actually, I'm very much looking forward to seeing our customers out there. Mm-hmm. Okay, big topic currently, topical, current going on
AI.
is the CrowdStrike fiasco.
Yes.
CrowdStrike.
Right.
Well, I mean, Intel today too. Just today.
They had a
18,000 person layoff.
Oh.
Just today, 15% of its staff, and they're going to save $10 billion. So
it's always staff that we have to cut to do that.
Well, Gelsinger from VMware, their CEO, took over Intel a 3 years back, and for all intents and purposes, he's been a fantastic CEO from the looks of it. But they've been having a lot of problems, and I don't know if you followed it, but their 13th and 14th generation desktop chips are apparently like killing themselves. Like there's a clock issue.
Oh.
There's a thing, and one of it started in February. These gamers were saying, "Hey, my workstation's locking up," and the studio basically said all of our stuff's locking up in developing these games for this. And then it turned into, well, the motherboard manufacturers aren't doing the right settings in their BIOS, and then this and that and the other thing. Intel put out a microcode update finally last month. But it turns out that if the damage has been done, the damage has been done.
You're done.
So so all of this on top of probably a massive class action building up and all this fun stuff. So
wasn't like AMD poised to take away a bunch of market share from Intel? I feel like I've heard that for the last decade or something, right?
How many? That's the circle of life.
Yeah.
I remember I had Cyrex processors back in the the early 2000s and the 90s, and then
ARM's
AMD
getting
was
kind of hot right now.
Well, that's the thing too. Yeah. So it's cyclical, and I don't think it's good for anybody if Intel severely struggles, right? I mean, you want to see competition, you want to see that, and they certainly have. ARM's eating a lot of their lunch, and the mobile, but Windows is even pushing ARM now. So
yeah,
finally, again,
I like that they're low power chips. I like that we'll get them in the Raspberry Pis, and we can start to put pretty substantial processing out in little itty bitty boxes, behind a light switch type of a thing. That's pretty neat. What the hell do you put on
most
them? That's a whole
definitely.
different question, but yeah.
I mean, to pat him on the back, Apple's just done a fantastic job of taking something like that they did it when they went from PowerPC to Intel. This transition from an architecture has been, the way they do it, for whatever reason, has been very impressive. And I have a MacBook Air, and I don't have to think about the fact that it's not x86. Don't have to think about it. And the battery is what it is, like you said, it's super responsive. So, yeah. So, CrowdStrike. I can't imagine you're listening to this podcast and don't know what we're talking about. But yeah, it was really weird because, like anything nowadays, you have to read the media, how you consume it, and put your brain thinking cap on. And I think
you have to put your thinking cap on for friggin' everything these days.
And critical thinking, though, I think is a rare earth element now. And then you've got ChatGPT, where people are like, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to see what the dumb box tells me, the hallucinating engine tells me, and that's my opinion. I'm going to fight for it. Silliness. But this CrowdStrike thing originally came out, and it was, what's happening with Azure?
Right.
Because the day before, Azure had an outage, and so they got tied into it. But then the next day, all these Microsoft, 8.5 million, I think, Microsoft PCs
crippled,
tip over
everything. Yeah.
So it turns out that CrowdStrike pushed a bad update, much like, who did this 10 years ago? Was it McAfee?
I think McAfee did one. I know Microsoft has done one.
Sophos has done one.
Yeah, it's not unique to CrowdStrike. I think that's the concept that you kind of led with at the beginning there, that enshittification of the user space, the code space. I see it in simple things, like I want to be able to copy my password out of my password safe and paste it into a text box. I mean, that's why I have a password safe. Why can't I do that? Right? Can't do that. Nope. And
you talking about your Bitwarden on your mobile device?
Mobile device, desktop. I mean, you take your pick. It's simple things like this that should work. It's why aren't we going through and testing our apps? Why aren't we doing that process? Why aren't we,
It came up at a post bike ride drinks last night, believe it or not, among my cycling friends, who none of them are in IT. And my buddy even said, he goes, you said to me, Matt, and I get it. You say, Matt, I'm in IT, and I go crazy. I pull my hair out over this stuff. And you say, what about the people who aren't technically inclined? How are they supposed to deal with this nonsense when it drives me crazy and I struggle with what should work? How does mom and my dad get into it, right? And yeah. So this is the couple rubs on the CrowdStrike thing. First of all, CrowdStrike runs as a kernel module. This is also a political interesting thing, because Microsoft responded to this by saying, if it wasn't for that naughty EU, we wouldn't have had to let them into the kernel. Because supposedly the EU said, if you're going to run your Defender stuff in the kernel as a competitor to CrowdStrike, you cannot keep out your competitors from leveraging the same amount of functionality. Fine. I'm going to stand on principle and say Microsoft and security providing is as oxymoronic as it gets. I'm sorry. I have a long memory. I refuse to forget about what come before us when it comes to Windows OS security. Having said that, not every security vendor runs in kernel space, but CrowdStrike does. And so CrowdStrike obviously pushed out a bad update. And the whole point of, I'm going to say antivirus, but right, endpoint data detection and response, EDR, is this rapid ability to say, hey, here's a threat. Let's protect everybody from it, these 0-day things, right? And they don't have to wait until they download the update tonight because they'll get infected by then. So there's this proactive thing.
Well, it should sit there. So, it should sit there and run and get just like a definition update or something, and not necessarily need
basically what this
basic code update. Yeah.
Yep. And so if a bad definition update comes down and if you're running in user space, the app crashes, poof, and that's that. If you're in the kernel, the OS crashes, blue screen, and there we are. So reading into it, apparently CrowdStrike, of course, this is all automated, and I'm not gonna throw cold water on that concept, but their testing were also, their tests were generated as well. They weren't testing it by quote unquote testing actual real world. They generated a test routine that said if it passes these things that we defined, we consider it good to go. It passed validation. What they didn't do was put a set of eyeballs on a single Windows machine on a monitor in the corner there and see if that screen went blue after pushing the definition. You think maybe they'll start doing that?
One would hope. I know that seems so simple to us, I guess. I go do changes for a customer and I'm like, okay, well, let's try these one over here and stop and pause for a second and then wait for screams to happen. And
maintenance mode only.
Yeah, right. Let's limit the scope of our impact. Let's make sure it doesn't blow up to everything, because you know what? I don't want to cause a downtime for a customer at 4:00 on a Thursday. Screw that.
Nope. I mean, I wrote.
We got to be first.
We
got to get it out there first.
Right? Yeah. I have an iPhone app that I wrote. I've written a handful of mobile apps over the last couple of decades, and in Xcode on Mac OS, there are. Don't get me wrong. I'm an amateur programmer. I'm a weekend warrior. But you can do these like user tests. I can write unit tests. I haven't done it once because you know how I test it? I use the simulator and I use the app and I use the phone and I check my things and it all looks good. But you can write routines that you build the code, and then that continuous integration development thing, what happens is it gets passed over to the tests and it programmatically taps on this and tells me if it crashes or whatever. That's all well and good, but again, the validation is only as good as I'm giving myself a second chance to fail and not trusting my lying eyes. You
have to do the work of writing the code and do the work of writing the test. So it's not that that the test is a bad test. It's just there's two opportunities for you to screw it up. You can screw up the code and you can screw up the test, and then they both get out there. And it's human nature to be inconsistent and break stuff and not do things.
Is it ever?
Yeah, right? I mean, I know when we talk about DR, for example, pretty much anything, honestly, it's here's what the tech does, but truly we need layer 8. We need us humans to be consistent, to document things for the humans, document why for the humans, that kind of stuff. And we miss that. I don't know.
So if you want to have conversations about endpoint detection and response and stuff like that, and where some pitfalls are, or some alternatives possibly, we're happy to chat about that. We've been having an awful lot of conversations around that. To that end, let's see, and then of course the optics are great, right? CrowdStrike says we're going to send out $10 DoorDash cards. Is that something they sent out, like $10? I'm not kidding. Like the CEO came out and did a nice heartfelt apology, right, about as good as you can ask. And then and we're going to send you $10 DoorDash. Man, oh man, what a net negative move in my opinion. Like, really?
Was it like $10 DoorDash per endpoint affected?
I don't think. No. I think
signed
it's
up
like,
for a mailing list.
Sorry, Coz, Mr. Subscriber, Mr. Owner of CrowdStrike. Here's $10 for your trouble. If Delta's suing them, Delta's planning to sue them. They said they lost $500 million because it snarled the air traffic. Now, I don't think they'll win that. Maybe
look at some of these programs. I believe the banking industry. I know I just saw the airline industry. All of the bookings for airlines are written on like COBOL or something. It's running on a Windows 3.1 laptop kind of.
Well, that's why Southwest stayed up, because they're running 3.1. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I know. It's that software was old when I was born, and we're still leveraging it for. Right.
Yeah, but I'm sitting here almost like. That's a Chad move right there. Like, I'm sitting here in my personal aspect being forced to upgrade software because something that it works with will break unless I'm on the latest and greatest. So I'm forced into this perpetual upgrade cycle where the new stuff is broken. Like stuff that's worked for years, and now I have to upgrade it because this thing, and it breaks something that I've relied on for 8 years, and it drives me mad because I just want to be left alone and keep it the version that I'm running and just leave me alone.
I have, for the last, 10, 15 years, I have a Bluetooth ODBI connector for the car, and there's an app, because it's a little thing, there's an app, I've downloaded the app on the phone, and it's walked forward, and it's not one of those things that I use all the time. Friend came over because they had an error light on their car, updated the app, plugged it into the thing. I 3/4 of the time couldn't get it to work. Sits there and blinks at me. Why? Why?
It's the same device you've ever had, and they just keep updating it and keep making it worse.
Yes. Because they want their sweet money. They want their, you can't use this more than one place. You can't, whatever. I'm going to sell you this thing that you can't use. That concept there bugs me a lot.
I've got a Synology at home, right? And I was running version 6 or whatever forever, and they finally deprecated that, and I held off on 7, and finally this week I'm like, you know what? For giggles, I'm going to finally do it. Broke all my NFS mounts on my Mac. I had a fight with a time machine, blew up everything. Now, could I have read 8 years worth of release notes between where I was at and where I went to, and maybe found something that referred to it? Maybe. But I mean,
there's sometimes you do that to yourself. Sometimes I don't keep up with those incremental changes. So now I've got all of this deferred maintenance, and it's a much bigger project.
That. Yep.
Right. But
I hate that instinct of mine though to say you should have just left it alone, Matt. Is really, and that's my default position. But now I can't even leave it alone because then new stuff's not supported.
Yeah. It's this weird catch-22. I want to keep my containers updated. I want to keep stuff running, but there's always these incremental changes, so it always takes care in feeding. So, like, honestly, that's one of the ones I look at for infrastructure as code. Do we write these deployment scripts? Do we do these things? I'm like, sure, I can do that today, and I can.
But what moving piece is going to render?
And I can copy
useless?
It and redo it tomorrow, and something I'm going to have to go back and debug it and reconfigure it because something has changed between yesterday and today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot, so many moving pieces. Yeah.
Speaking of containers, I've got 5 or 6 VMs that run anywhere between 1 and 5 Docker containers, 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Each?
Portainer.
Okay.
I installed it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I actually have my arms around my Docker containers. Like what's running where, if it's an image, this and that. But then in part of my little home lab rejiggering, I bought another Supermicro piece of hardware with a modest CPU and good memory capacity.
Really thrilled with Supermicro lately.
Yeah. I mean, we all built our home labs out of them 7 or 8 years ago now, and I'm like, that's working great. I'm waiting for that moment for it to fall over, so I'm trying to get ahead of that. And I had like 3 little Intel NUCs that max at 32 gigs of RAM. vSAN was eating all the RAM, and it's just like these NUCs are just. I'm done with this horizontal build out for a home lab. I just want a couple of decently sized boxes and have HA. But I had Z-Wave running in a Docker container, and I had the USB stick hanging off the host, passing it through to the VM. Well, I didn't want to run that here in my office anymore. I want to run it out in my garage, but if I put the stick out in the garage, not great signal-wise.
That's the coverage, yeah.
So I put my stick into my Mac, run this serial to net binary that basically turns around and puts it out on TCP/IP. Z-Wave's JS is smart. You can reference a TCP port instead of a local device, and Bob's your uncle. It works great. But I wanted to move that Docker container, Kaz. It's great unless you have volumes also. And now it's no longer this little thing.
Well, you got to pay attention to that. You got to pay attention to that.
Well, how come I can't just say zip up everything involved with this container? Because no, you need to add 3 different. Now you got to go get the volume separately and bring it. That doesn't sound very portable to me, and it's like this is not what I was promised.
So here's the solution for you for that. You don't care about the container. You don't care about the container that it downloads, compiles, and builds and puts together. Right?
I use the compose script, the YAML file, so that declares all that great.
So that's what you need is you need your YAML file, and then you need whatever config stuff that you pass to it. And the way I approach that is that I've got my YAML, my Docker Compose YAML config all in Git, because it's you can go look at anyone else's and it's who cares.
You're not addressing my thing though. The volume, the Docker volume.
So that's what I do, and then in my Docker Compose script, I've got a volume declaration component down at the bottom where I'm calling an NFS mount directly. And then I'm referencing that for my config. So now my compose file's over here, and I've got this volume, or this, in my case, SQLite is the bane of my existence, but I've got this NFS share, a single NFS share, and I just make sure that my NFS share is backed up. And that has all of my config, all of my data space, all of my everything. I want it on a
So
different.
you know, I'm not talking about just a path reference. I'm talking about a Docker volume object.
Don't put it in a Docker volume. What are you
Oh.
backing that volume with?
Well, I'm saying this container,
Mm-hmm.
the YAML came with a volume declaration.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a Docker volume object
Mm-hmm.
that
And
stores it within the Docker layer, right? It's there.
it maps to a space, and you get to, as the administrator, choose which space that maps to.
Yep. And since the cat's out of the bag now, I have to, because I didn't put that in a known centralized location,
Mm-hmm.
I have to do an export,
Mm-hmm.
a manual re-import of that, and then that's where I'm kind of like, ugh.
Which is things like so SQLite being my common issue, because SQLite and NFS do not play well together. I think it's
right.
Is it Portworx from Pure? They've got Portworx.
Yes.
Yeah. So that one is the one that I've contemplated, thought about. Haven't actually pulled the trigger on trying to install and configure and use. But that application is supposed to be a Docker container consumption layer that obfuscates the fact that it's on NFS on the back end, or iSCSI on the back end, or whatever. It gives you that same experience without it being whatever. So that's that one extra step. You put something in there to make it run on whatever, and now my containers, I've built my environment such that my config and my path references are exactly the same, whether you're running it in the lab or at home.
So maybe I'm not the concept of volumes in Docker networks. I'm not taking issue with that.
Mm-mm.
I think maybe I'm taking issue with the fact that Docker, the tools themselves, should have an export that grabs it all. Because obviously the container is referencing a volume, so it's not unaware or ignorant to that.
Mm-hmm. It's effectively, you've got your VM with the disk running on local storage. Mm-hmm. You built your VM and you click those grab buttons.
Everything.
Yeah, but there is no concept of exporting a Docker container. Like from what from where you're looking at it, you're consuming this thing. Are you making changes to it and publishing it and doing a thing that way?
No, I could. There's a Docker commit command.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. Listen, I mean, a Docker container, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Yes, the container itself is meant to be disposable.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be honest, we're working with data.
Mm-hmm.
That is stateful.
Mm-hmm.
And Docker's own native way to do that is Docker volumes. So if you want to export a container and move it, would it not stand to reason that it would bundle up the volume and allow you to portably move it? Even if it pulls down a fresh image, let me move this thing and the things that are attached to a new host.
No.
Well, clearly, no.
No.
Dumb.
No, because the container is just the definition of the container. It is just the definition of the container. That is all Docker is providing. And it's up for you as the administrator on the back end to manage the storage and whatever you're providing it.
What are you doing later today?
I'll give you a hand with it. Sure. We got some time.
Before you know, my whole home lab will be I infrastructure as code by the end of the day.
Whenever I get those kind of questions and I start talking to Neil about it, I blow his mind with how, like, I don't do that great of a job on it, I think, but I actually do quite a bit of, like, let me code this up and let me make it documented and let me commit it to Git and all of that for my own environment. I actually do.
It's funny, whenever I look at somebody's laptop with screen share, and you're probably the prime example, I'm like, man, they got their workflow together. Look at how efficient they are and this and that. And I feel like I look at my screen and it's completely the teenager with clothes all over his floor, and that's my closet.
That's how I feel like I am sometimes though too. So maybe it's just the fact that it's someone else's.
Well, I guarantee you're not impressed with mine.
All right.
Well, I mean, that was a quick 30 minutes right there. That went by fast.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So
well, that was a spring in the step. Excited to talk about stuff.
There you go. What else do you have for like cool projects, cool things that you've accomplished? Is the lab the big one? I've been doing a lot of
the lab's a big one. It's not all that exciting because it's not really related to our customers, because I don't think you're ever going to hear me recommend a Synology for a customer for a lot of reasons, right? But as a home user,
but it's NFS
it works just fine and dandy.
So yeah.
But still not fast enough to be centralized storage for me when it comes to, we're talking VMs.
Mhm.
It's just not. The spinning disc, it's just not. And the Synology has an expansion slot, and I thought the options were you can either go 10 gig with the slot, or you can put your SSD cache or NVMe cache in the slot. They make a card that's a single 10 gig port and two M2 slots.
Oh.
Ooh. So I've got that being delivered today,
Okay.
and I'm going to throw a little NVMe in there, and I have a 10 gig.
You got a little switch?
I use Unify. I
Mhm.
mean, whatever, it works fine. Their switching is pretty strong. I got a little 10 gig switch. I'm going to have a back end network between my two ESXi hosts, my Synology, and direct to my Mac here in the office because I got a Mac Studio and it can run 10.
Mhm.
So the idea is I'm going to have this back end 10 gig network.
You know, that's one of those ones that we kind of forget about when we talk about technology going crappy and switching, that layer 2 construct. I don't usually run into a switch that has a problem just being a switch. Pretty much anything I find these days, I can plug it in. If I need layer 2, it builds me a VLAN or two, and that's it, and it just switches. You can
You're
find
talking from a home aspect.
from a home aspect, from a consumer aspect. I think for the most part that layer 2 thing, and we don't really think about it anymore, right? That's where I want stuff to go. Is like, it's this. I just plug this thing in and it just works.
But that's also sometimes to the detriment of us. I've had a customer who had a NetApp
Mhm.
years ago and was saying, "Oh, I need to add more storage. I can just pop down to Fry's and grab a couple of 2 terabyte drives."
I remember that.
I was like, And I also think though that's also leaked in. Well, 10 gig is 10 gig. No, like the idea of port buffers, inline rate,
Mhm.
and all of that. And why would I spend $12,000 on a Nexus switch when I can pop down to Best Buy and they've got an 8-port 10 gig switch for $600?
So there's a difference between using a incorrect piece of equipment and trying to do something else with it, right? If I'm trying to, I don't know, build a bridge, my pickup truck is not what I
But
want to
it's
use
10
for a
gig,
dump truck. That's yeah.
There it is. I broke him. Yeah,
I didn't
no,
say 10 gig. I said
completely agree.
switching. Yeah.
But you're right. Of all you're saying, I think I kind of poured water on it. The
Mhm.
point is, of all the things we gripe about, at least there are certain things we
There
can.
are. Every now and then we see some things that still actually just kind of work. Yeah.
I will not mention Unify's layer 3 stuff, its MDNS, or its integration with smart devices because.
MDNS. Good Lord.
Are you on? What's your internet? Are you back on your Comcast connection, or are you on your satellite right now?
I'm
Yeah.
on Comcast. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was going to get real heavy with you if you tried to go Starlink for the podcast.
I don't know if you noticed earlier you were talking about VMware Explorer and when the dates were. I'm like, oh crap, let me quick switch my Wi-Fi.
I didn't.
I lost you for a couple of seconds there, but you were blah 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 blahing, so it's all good.
In the middle of an episode.
Well, we're recording locally. What? Come on.
Wow. Okay. Well, tell the audience what I'm complaining about here, Mr. Hotshot.
I just got a Starlink, so I was asking you what you had, what kind of fun things were going on. I've actually had a whole bunch of projects, all kind of finish here all at the same time. One of them being I demoed Starlink last month because we were out and someone had it, and I'm like, let me see if I can work off of that. It did. I could. So I bought one. I've been using it. I made myself a little Go box for it out of a Pelican case did a 12 volt conversion for that. And so now I can throw that all in a box and throw it in the back of the car, take it down to the boat, take it out camping, take it wherever, and we can honestly.
Can you run that off a 12 volt battery for a significant amount of time?
So that's a next thing. Yes. I want to say like right now I've got it plugged in and it's pulling 12 volts and something like 5 or 6 amps. So it's not
60 watts, something like that.
Yeah,
60,
it's not a
watts.
ton. During the winter, it's got like a snow melt function, so it'll warm up, heat up the dish itself, and keep the ice off of it. But yeah, you should be able to. And then a couple of solar
Get a
panels,
lithium
I guess.
battery, and you go camping and pop it up there, pointed at the sky, and you could.
That's the idea.
The purpose of camping.
That's the idea. I'm looking at it like I want to be able to ensure that I have the ability to do the work. The girlfriend works like 3/4 time, so she ends up with actually quite a bit of free time than I do. So if I can be like, yeah, let's go do the thing. Yes, we can go Thursday night. I gotta hang out during the day and do some work. and then we can go do whatever the entire rest of the weekend. This should allow me to do that, right?
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the concept of the Go Box and getting that all set up and being able to power it however. And that was originally when we were doing the SUV stuff and converting those and putting all the secondary batteries in for the systems and the fridges. One of the things I saw was the Apple TV is actually 12 volt, but there's a transformer inside the TV that allows you to pop into. So basically what people were doing was bypassing that and wiring directly into the 12 volt, and that way you're getting your media box right there in the car for you and all of that. Pretty neat.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. I did put a 110 power supply in it, so that like right now it's sitting in the corner and I've got an extension cord plugged into the wall, because sometimes you're at an Airbnb, sometimes you're on the boat and you've got 12 volt.
And so really what happened was when we were on Zoom, you were testing it. Your video would block every 10 seconds for like a second. But you showed me a rolling ping, and you get like 20 milliseconds to the 4 ones, right? Something like that. It was ridiculous. And then
on Comcast right now I'm 15, 17, so it's not. But then
you would drop a packet pretty regularly every 10 packets, maybe something like that.
And you know what's been a lot better, actually, just like yesterday to today, was I got a 150-foot cable, and so now I can push the dish further back into the yard, and those trees that were being obstructive are now a little bit lower on the horizon. So
I mean, if your latency stays low, you can deal with packet loss, right? That's the whole point of TCP. It's just your bandwidth will get squashed. You won't be able to really get anything going from a high bandwidth standpoint. But
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I plug it in, and it I've left it running here, and my phone will hop on it, and I won't realize that I'm on the Starlink. That's
pretty cool.
Which is super cool. Yeah.
That's very cool.
And Netflix doesn't.
Well, nice, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got some equipment. You said all your projects kind of wrapped at once. I bet you kind of were a little deflated. I mean, there's the excitement of them being done, but it's okay. Now what?
Oh, now I get to do all the little cleanup things. Like I've got enough. I've got more than enough to do.
Oh, there you go.
But
I've got all stuff being delivered now, so I'm super excited. I'm getting very excited to finally put together, decommission my little Nooks, and I might do some Proxmox stuff with the Nooks, or an alternative hypervisor and play around, or Kubernetes Helm, something like that. That'll free those up. They'll be good for that.
I was looking at Rancher, and maybe it was because I was doing it in the evening, but I was always struggling to get the initial thing deployed. Like there was always that gap of like, okay, you download the stuff, you do the thing, and now that it's running, I'm like, what? But how? I'm missing something there. I don't know what it is.
Well, I read somebody talking about Docker, and it was basically where I was for a while. It's like, what can I do this? I feel like there is no good documentation to get me from A to Z. Everything always assumes a letter, like, because when I follow the instructions, it does not work. And it's just, and I'm like, I feel you, man. Like, if you're going to put together documentation, let's not assume that somebody is expert in Chef, like, or whatever. And it's some shitification there too.
Yeah. I found, actually with the trash guides, have you done anything with that for the R's? No? No. The R's, the sonars, the radars.
Yeah, I see.
So there's a yet another app that you can run that collates quality definitions. So like I want 264, I want 1080p, I want a web rip, I want a this, that, the other thing, right? So you can collate these things, and it actually walks you through. I was fairly impressed. It's a big concept to get over or understand, but it walks you through. And each time he presents a concept, each time there's a concept that pops up there, there's a little expandable thing that's like, why is this an important concept to know? Here's an example of this important concept to know. So you read all this stuff, and you're like, huh? And you click that, and you go, oh. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I go to like GitHub, right? And you go in it loads the README file. It's like installation, and it's just, well, come on, guys. Like, yeah, okay, exactly. Sure. I'll get right on that. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad to hear that things are accelerating here for you, that you're making progress on that. I'm excited on my side. I've got a bunch of stuff coming today. And then other than that, suffering in the hot summer right now.
You got a hot summer? You've got AC out there, right?
I have AC, but when I'm outside riding and it was 96 degrees last night, that was an interesting one.
And like 99% humidity?
Yeah, and it's just, I could feel as good as I want, but the second you're in that heat, your heart rate is, you jump, and then your performance is, they take 25% off what you think you could do today, because it's just, and I sweat like an absolute animal, just in my eyes and just down my face. So it's funny, I press the helmet against my forehead on stops, and it's a stream. There's no dripping, it's a stream. So sorry I have to gross everybody out to finish off, but so Aria Workshop on the 8th. What?
Yeah. I just got AC too. Like yesterday was the first day.
There you go.
Amazing.
You look much less like an unshaved candle.
No, there we go.
Normal. So
and there's no running in the background.
I heard that reference from Succession. If you've watched Succession, they reference Kendall and they say he looks like an unshaved candle. Anyway, nice. VMware Explore, September 10, 11, 12, our Redux. And the ARIA workshop is coming up here August 8th, with the class being September 24th. So keep an eye on the links and the data here. Mr. Coz, thank you for giving me a reason to use the beep button this episode. That was fun.
Beep. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll take care.